It's not. Maybe I need to do it over here.
Yes,
I have a question to ask.
yeah.
Is there a way to
Yes, 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 yes.
Oh,
We should, Sharon, you said these were sent out via email? When did they sent it out to you? The register?
Yes.
so I'll be okay.
Okay. Absolutely.
Thank you.
You're on and ready to go. I'm seeing them and they say go.
Are you gonna do introductions?
If you want me to. Absolutely. Huh. I'm gonna take one here. I don't know if they can hear me or not. So after I introduce Reverend Rochelle, I'm gonna go back over there and see if they heard that, and may come up and reintroduce her. I don't know.
Are we having fun?
What?
Are we having fun?
I am honored to introduce you our interim moderator, Reverend Rochelle Brown, who has been kind enough to come and be a part of our gathering and here in North Carolina. Not only is she coming to tell us a few things, but more than that, she's coming to hear from us, which I think is really extraordinary. So let's just give her our time and attention and all of the things we are feeling and knowing.
Thank you. Thank you. So I guess the big question is this thing on? Is it working? Yes, absolutely. Well, this being in two places at once via technology, I want to say hello to everyone there at Founders. I'm so glad you can all be there. I am, of course, as you all know, here in Sacramento, and this is going to be an interesting dynamic to be listening. This point of listening is very important. Reverend Elder Tony Freeman, as we've heard from this morning, has been talking about Office of Church Life and Health and revitalization. He is going to take that hat off for a minute, no, but put the other hat on, the elder hat, the listening hat. And that's what we're going to do here. And this is going to be a technology moment that we're going to have. I'm going to do a few slides and give you where we are for just a few moments. Then there's 4 questions. When we get to the 4 questions, we'll talk about how we're going to do it. So I realize we just had lunch. So everyone take a deep breath. Exhale. We're here and we're present. And if you have not met me, I know the folks here have just met me, but if there are people there at Founders who have not met me, my name is Rochelle Brown, and I am an elder. And I am your interim moderator, and there will be another general conference coming up in 2019, and it will be in Orlando. But before we get to all of this, I would like to begin by saying where are we? And you'll see on the slide, location, interim time. And I think they're advancing the slides there as well. So the location is interim time. And like Tony was talking a little earlier about the wilderness, this isn't a map that just shows up. It's a place that when we know we've arrived here. What does this mean? What is this like? And some things that I think some of us are still trying to process. How did we get here? And that's part of our journey. I think it's important in the interim time. If you've ever had a church go through interim time, you know, wow, how did this happen? What are we doing? It's a difficult thing, but we also know that during an interim time, powerful change can happen. It's a time of transition. That word liminal that Tony used earlier, it's a liminal time. It's that moment where you cross the threshold and what's behind you, you can't go back. And you don't really know what's in front of you. And that's what you're going to walk in and explore. So we are on this threshold. Now I have a question. How many of you remember what you were like 10 years ago? Yeah. Have you changed? Maybe just, I'm seeing big change. I'm hoping there's probably people who are coming. Change. And I just want to say something. Coming up in the middle of July will be the 10-year anniversary of my ordination. Right? Think about this. 2 years ago, I didn't have this right here today on my radar. What's on our radar for 10 years from now? The other thing I want to just note, at a time of interim and at a time of change, we don't know. Lots of things. We know where we come from. There's lots of things we don't know. When I'm in places that have such a deep, rich MCC history, I'm really in awe. You know, you're there in Founders, the founding church. We're about to celebrate a 50th anniversary next year, a big deal coming. And I like to put this in perspective. I walked into an MCC in 2001. First time. Went to seminary a couple years later. I never heard Troy Perry preach in the flesh. I heard him at General Conference in 2013. It's not the same. The next generation of MCC will have never met Troy Perry. They may have never heard him preach. They may not have heard, down the road, Nancy Wilson preach. They don't have all of the things that all of us are so accustomed to being. This is who MCC is. This is what we identify with as MCC. The next generation is going to have a different starting point. Now, these stories and this history, this legacy, it must live. And that's part of our work as well. But I just want to put that into perspective and say, there are people in our churches who have heard of Troy Perry, and there will be some who have heard of Nancy Wilson, but have never met them in person. So who are we is the question of our interim time. It's the question that we're wrestling with. And I think it's a key question that we have the opportunity to ask. And this is a time of transition. And as in leadership transition, it creates new opportunities for us to live into this vision, our mission, and our core values. To live into that we have been called to be and do as people of faith who support human rights. This is a moment. And the intentional part of this interim is to say out loud, hey, we're in this moment right now. We're right here. And I want to say how I see MCC, and it's those of you that are at Founders, you don't know, Reverend Elder Frida Smith is with us, and we had lunch together. And I shared with her, and I want to share with all of you, a perspective of thinking about MCC as both movement and church. There were times that we were like the radical activist anarchy movement, and the traditional church looked at us like, huh? Right? You're never going to be church. There's just no way, their perspective. But we were movement, and we have our movement impulses that are really strong. And then we have some places where we're church. And I think we have both of that. And in those spaces, when we're both movement and church, in the middle resides our core values. It's where we live. It's our spirituality. It's what I call our spiritual fluidity. There's some of us that are less likely to be on a protest line and marching and signs and bullhorns and screaming and yelling. That's okay. That's okay. They'd be more likely to open the church so you can make the signs there, get your bottled water, be sure you have all that you need, and you leave your cars there, and we'll all be here when you come back, or, whatever that is. I'm using this as an example for really right now to say it's okay. We can't all be the same. We can't. We're going to be different because some of us have a different reason for being in MCC. We're movement and we're church. And in the middle, our spirituality can flourish. and who we are and what draws us together. And this is that interim time where we can explore this. And I believe it's through our core values. Now, some of you may know I was an interim pastor for quite a few years in MCC in a couple of churches. And it was ironically for times when the church was planted and I came in as the interim following the one who started the church. That's a unique set of circumstances. And it's not lost on me that here in this moment, we are in a spot where the founding generation of MCC leadership is no longer the moderator. Troy and Nancy were the founding generation. And it's not lost on me that we're standing here and saying, now what? And I believe, as I went to work for MCC on staff for a couple of years in the Office of Emerging Ministries, developing new churches, what we did is when I introduced MCC to someone that had never heard of this, I don't start with Troy Perry, I don't start with Nancy Wilson, I don't start with all the numbers and all that and say, let me tell you about our values. We are committed to building communities that are fully inclusive in all ways. We are committed to spiritual transformation, and we are active. We're socially active, social justice. And they're like, I'm with you. Now, we haven't gone to the details of how we live that out, but very few people will sit there and say, oh, well, or they will say, I don't want to be an inclusive, that scares me, community. Who wants to have a community? I want a dictatorship. We're kind of there in many places in the world, actually. But I agree with all of that. They're like, well, how have we been doing? And I think we're at that place as, are we truly committed to having these radically diverse communities, theologically, socially, culturally, spiritually, all the other things, gender, orientation, class, race? Are we truly committed to this level of diversity and inclusion in these types of communities? Are we willing to be spiritually transformed? Are we committed to social action? These are the questions before us. And I don't take these lightly. And I'm not going to say they're going to be answered by 2019. Okay? But I am going to say we're going to wrestle together. And that's part of why this is a very intentional beginning of during this interim time between now and General Conference in Orlando, is to listen deeply and act boldly. If we, as the MCC leadership, pastors, you all know this, if you do not have a time where you sit down and listen, there will be a disconnect that's so great, you'll wonder what happened and not know why. So we want to really sit and listen deeply and act boldly. We need to actively discover, discern, and then decide. The listening's the discovery. The discernment happens as we hear stories that may be alike across areas of the world. And we need to position MCC to respond to 21st century people. I would say actually be 21st century people. A lot of what Tony's been talking about, it's true. We have different needs. We have different things happening. And we need to prepare to select the next model. Now, you're probably thinking, that's only a couple of years from now. Well, you're right. That's why we're here, and this is serious. This is real. And so I want to truly hear from all of you what is on your mind and on your hearts. Now, I need to say, it's very important. I've said this to the senior leadership team, the Council of Elders, and the governing board. MCC is only as strong as the churches, ministries, and people. You are MCC. That's it. If you decide to be MCC and wish to live out and be MCC, then there is a Metropolitan Community Churches. If you choose not to be, then there won't be. That has to be an important point during a time of interim. You go all the way back and you say, well, who are we? We're going to discover, we're going to discern, and we're going to move forward. But we have to start at the beginning. So we have to focus on all of you. You're the focus. You're the, it has to be the people who are showing up every Sunday that are present, living these values in the communities in which they live and doing the ministry. So that's where these 4 questions come from. These 4 questions do not come out of an institutional desire to survive. It comes out of a real need to understand the people where they are today, in the churches, on the ground, in the spaces where you're doing ministry. Very important. So out of that, I realize question 2 and 3, and I'll go through them. Number 1, what does being MCC mean to you today? Today. It might have meant something when you first got here. But what does it mean to you today? What's one of the best features of your local church? And what's one of the greatest challenges? Now, I know when you all checked in, the pastors and the folks came up, which it was good to see. What are your features, greatest challenges? There may have been things that haven't been said yet. Let's make sure we say it. And then number 4, what do you need from MCC? And that's the only denominational question really in it. What do you need from MCC in the next 3 years to follow God's call to do and be ministry? To do, to be, to have. Okay? Those are the 4 questions. Now, the fun part doing this in technology is we need to switch between, first we'll do answer to question 1, north, and then south. Now, I'm from the deep south. This whole lineage of north and south makes me very nervous. So I'm just going to say Northern California, Southern California. So if we could, I'm going to start up here, if that's okay, Sharon, because you're managing the technology. We'll start up here, and what I want you to do is just say what church you might be from, and what is, what does being MCC mean to you today? And I'll repeat, so if other folks can't hear, I'll do that. It'd be quick. You don't have, what does it mean to you today?
It means freedom.
Freedom. Doretha.
Yeah, be what we want to be.
That's right. Be what we want to be.
Community.
Community. Yes.
Accepted.
Accepted. Justice.
Means not having to put our pastors or parishioners on trial.
Not putting our pastors or parishioners on trial. Acceptance.
Celebration.
Celebration. Love.
Opportunities to reach out.
Opportunities to reach out. Yes.
Integration and sexuality and spirituality.
Integration of sexuality and spirituality. Yes.
Compassion.
Compassion.
Openness.
Openness. And can we switch over that quickly, that I pause for a second?
It's not going to be that quickly.
There's a
Yes.
delay. And so Tony Freeman is there on the other side if you want to start the switch. Tony Freeman's there and he's going to facilitate
So I'm going to
those.
mute you,
who want
and
to
then
answer.
I'm going to tell you to point at them.
It's got a green light. Oh, still there? Beautiful. Okay. International was where I left my mind. Somebody else. Roger. Diversity. All right. Freedom. Freedom. Thank you. Yes, Beth. Justice. Okay, great. Service. Absolutely. Thank you. Equality. Diversity of beliefs. Okay. Lots of different diversity, right? Oh. Celebration. Beautiful. Thank you, Daniel. God's love in action. Trend setting. That could only be in LA. Sorry, Northern California. Okay, I think we'll flip it back. We got some good responses here. Rochelle, you want to take it back up north? And with question 2? Okay, so we're going to all be comfortable with a moment of silence? You do not want me to sing. You do, you know. Take her away, Rochelle.
This down. Thank you, Tony, for facilitating there. Um, is there anything in questions 2 and 3? What are the best features of your local MCC church, and what's one of the greatest challenges that appear for folks here at a Church for All Sacramento gathering that maybe you would want to bring forward as best features, greatest challenge?
I think we're about best features. Is that really show them the Holy Spirit, people that are coming to our church,
Okay.
have felt that.
So the best feature is showing the anointing of the Holy Spirit for people who come to the church and that they experience that and they can feel it. Yeah. Is there a challenge you would put with that as well? Oh, smiling back at me. That's the response. No. Okay.
I think for our Folsom church, just starting out, our greatest challenge is just being able to get out there into the community and be seen and heard,
Right.
and hopefully meet those needs the community is looking for, as well as really establishing ourselves as a good person.
Yeah, so for the church starting in Folsom, Reflection MCC, it's getting out in the community, being seen, being heard, and meeting the needs that they're. Yeah, so that's in both ends.
The challenge is just to get the people to really believe what kind of church we are. That we do accept everybody, and you don't have to be, any particular class or whatever.
Yeah, to actually believe that we mean what we say.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Any best feature, greatest challenge here?
I went like 2 churches, remember many journeys,
Okay.
and I live in Sacramento, and I'm helping Folsom, good question. One of the great challenges that many journeys have faced was technology based. Because of bad situations that happen, that when you would Google peninsula,
So
you would get the bad, and that's what came up first.
So
So that kept people from believing that that was a loving and accepting community in a positive way. So having to go through those steps, the only way, we don't want to change our name, but we have to change our identity and put that in the past and learn from it. And all of the steps and challenges, cycles that came with that, changing the name, too many journeys. It was a congregational process of 9 months, year.
So dealing, just to
Reset.
reiterate back to the folks that are listening, you know, when at what was Peninsula MCC, realizing you needed to have a name change, you had some identity that you need to deal with, and going through the congregational process for 9 months, become many journeys. A lot of it had to do with technology.
It did.
It had to do with the technology challenges around the name, and the church adapted to 21st reality that technology has an impact. And it has an impact on how do we respond to it and make hard choices.
Yeah, and people had to go through that loss,
There was a loss,
you
yeah.
know, saying goodbye to the name. And what, you know, I was one of the family members and knowing that impact of like, wow, we are in that, you know, we're a younger church, but we are going through those cycles. And what that meant is it okay with you? Because guess what, we gotta do this either way, but we wanna touch base.
Yeah, so going through a cycle of change, even if you're a founding member of something, being available and open for change, even though you really don't have a choice. Yeah, I think that's relevant. I think that's real. Yeah. Want to flip it back? I know we're on a little bit of a delay here, and that'll give Sharon a little time. You can flip it back if there's something that wasn't said previously on 2 and 3 in the check-ins initially that they want to add.
Down to the mic and do the speaking.
Okay, so best feature, greatest challenge. Best feature of your local MCC, greatest challenge. Who would like to start? Come on down. Thank you, Tom.
We go. All right. I would say that our best feature is probably our Sunday worship service. Our biggest challenge is moving or expanding beyond that.
Okay, very concise. Thank you. Yep. Come on down, Amy.
I'm from FMCCLA. They are my family of choice. They're the motive, means, and help in confronting and planning my own future. They are the mutual observation of my own personal integrity through discussion and service to others. And they are the mirror into who I am, why, and for whom.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Yes. Best feature, greatest challenge.
So Corey Montoya, lay delegate, along with 2 other fabulous lay delegates. So our
Best feature,
okay.
greatest challenge.
The best feature, I think, is we have great leadership at our church. If we just, if FMCC can open up their eyes, like for example, Jennifer is a long-standing leader here. Roger Owens, another one. Lucia is another one. And Dean, of course, great. I mean, some of them are board of directors. We've had an awesome gift from Reverend Kevin. So there's great leadership here. So that's, I think, was at this point, as we move into the present and future, is one of our greatest features. Our greatest challenge, unfortunately, on the flip side is we don't utilize that leadership. We don't utilize that talent that we have, and that's a little bit sad, and it allows us to be kind of not move forward as we should. So.
Okay. Thank you. Kevin.
I'm Kevin. I'm from Founders. So our greatest feature, I think that our greatest feature is that we have this incredibly powerful, spiritually palpable story that so maps to the story of the first church. Like if you think about the history of this congregation and the denomination, the challenges that we had to overcome, it maps over and over and over again. Spiritually inspired, spiritually powerful. We need to tell the story in a way that it stays fresh and it stays relevant. And I think that our greatest challenge is that we've forgotten that. We've wanted to become, I said once in a sermon, we used to be fierce and fabulous, and we've kind of become beige and boring. And I think that we need to figure out how do we tell the story in ways that are relevant, that touch people, and we've lost the ability and the willingness to risk ourselves in telling that story.
Thank you, Kevin. Michael.
I'm Michael Sutherland from Resurrection Beach in Costa Mesa, and I think our greatest feature is the amount of service we do for the community, particularly the homeless community in Orange County. And we're in a period of growth right now. So I think our greatest challenge is what do we do with that growth and how do we keep nurturing that growth in a positive way?
Great. Thank you very much, Michael. Anyone else? Best feature, greatest challenge. Yes, sir.
Gene Metzger from MCC Coachella Valley. I think our greatest asset is a congregation with radical hospitality. And I think our greatest challenge is to get the word out to a community which is full of LGBT people who don't know who we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Gene. Thank you, Gene. Beth?
I'm Beth Kine from San Diego, and I think our best feature is instilling a sense of love to everyone who's part of our services and to our community and our neighborhood. And I think one of our, not our biggest challenge, but one of the challenges I think about a lot is parking. That a lot of people don't come to church because they complain about, I can't park anywhere. And it seems like a simple thing, but it's kind of what's on my mind.
Okay. Thank you. Those are real things. Thank you. Alejandro.
Hi, I'm Reverend Alejandro from Founders. Thank you. I think one of our greatest features is that we have a dynamic Hispanic community, Spanish-speaking service. But one also the greatest challenges is how to integrate the different cultures in this church. And yeah, we have a vibrant 1:30 service, but then bringing everyone together from 9, 11, and 1:30 is a challenge in itself. And even doing multicultural worship is a challenge in itself. And no one's really perfected it. You would have thought in 48 years we would have perfected it, but it's still a challenge. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro. Okay. Anyone else? I think we're going to flip it back to you, Rochelle. Thank you, everyone. Well, while we're waiting, I'll just tell you, oh, she's back. See, I knew if I did that. I'm done, Rochelle.
All right. This is working. I'm so happy. Just a little bit. Yes. And thank you all for the feedback. That's been really good to hear. Really good to hear. That you're dealing and facing these sorts of realities. The fourth question is really wide open, and I think that's a good thing. Is what would you need from MCC? I had 3 years, probably 3 years, or up until General Conference, or maybe we'll be on if you want, to follow God's call to be and do ministry. What do you want? We're going to start here. You've all had a lot of time pondering, and I'm sure that their founders are doing the same. And I'm going to use need. I wrote need. I know there's a lot of wants. You can mention wants. I'm having some feedback. Hold on. That's not my hand. There's Shane. Hi, Shane. Oh, okay. All right. So while we're getting that worked out, what do you think to do and be ministry? To be in ministry, what do you need?
Now, why all of a sudden would that start happening? Try again. Is that muted? That is muted, right?
Yes. So the MCC churches that I've been a part of have been fairly strong in terms of service ministry. They get helping with the immediate needs.
So bring service ministry, immediate needs, sort of like the Maslow hierarchy of basic needs.
Right, so, but from my perspective, that's very important, but it doesn't necessarily get to the root cause of oppression. So what I would think from NCC is guidance and leadership for the denomination, in terms of, how can we become a movement then as a denomination? Doing anti-oppression work, it's not just about homophobia and transphobia, but it extends beyond that to racism and classism and ableism, to name a few.
So I'm going to reiterate, folks, just real quick. So the conversation started, MCC needs, the service ministry needs. I would call that charity. We do many charitable things, sharing sometimes. We do many charitable works, food and homes and present with homeless. But that's not getting to the root causes. Can I use the word systemic? Would that be okay? So that's not getting to the root causes as to what is perpetuating this need in which we're meeting the service piece. And you would like to see MCC denominationally do more, not just say more, but do more around anti-oppression work, dealing with the variety of isms and different things that are happening. I think anti-oppression is a big piece, but not just limited to LGBT issues.
Right. And to empower congregations.
And to empower congregations.
Like, what can we do?
What can you do? Right. How can you be more social justice and social action oriented? You don't want to lose the charity part, but you want to be more visible. Okay. That's and the movement, I'm so sorry. How can we have our movement impulse to be more active, to be more present? And maybe in some places that's more than others. But I think what you want to see is how does the denomination work to empower the local church? It's good. It's a big one. Just go for it. That's what I say. Just. Yes, Scott. Technology.
Support, just in the real time, teaching churches some of them are engaging, to use technology, acknowledge that something as simple as creative communication doesn't show on housekeeping,
Right.
And that's old stuff. How to think outside the box, it's gonna put our word out there.
So how are we using technology? How are we teaching people how to use technology? How are we adapting? And how are we doing in a way that is managed? You can manage it actually.
We don't have just pastors.
We don't have pastors updating web pages. This is funny, Scotty. I just had this conversation last week. I think Tony and I were talking about this. Tony and I have been on this listening tour. We've spent so much time together. This time we're away from each other, but every weekend it's been Tony and I, and we've been talking. And I said, I believe that some of us, and this is not just MCC, this is across all industries, all whatever, all churches. Many of us have adapted to technology, but we have not fully integrated technology into everything that we do. And that space is a 21st century question, which, I've talked to consultants and, I get that free consultation moment. I take advantage of it. I ask, how does this work? How does the technology work? Like, well, we're not fully integrated. We've adapted. And I think for some of us, we adapt to the new thing and we start using it, but it's not transforming us in other ways that we're really integrated. So it's a key point, and I'm hearing that in other places. So thank you. Yeah. So Retha, I feel you wanting to say something, and then Kimberly.
So I'm trying to formulate this question in my head,
Okay.
but it has to do with the millennials and somehow or another engaging them in such a way where they begin to take ownership of the denomination as well as the local church.
Engaging millennials to have ownership, I'd say empowerment and ownership at the local church level and in the denomination.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask.
I think I remember a time when there were youth conferences.
Yes.
In other denominations where they would get together and the youth would, across the denomination would sit and talk about their experiences, what they wanted to see, how they could shape the future, that's where you tap your next level of leadership. And so it would be awesome to kind of see that sort of movement happening within MCC.
Thank you. And there have been young adult mentoring retreats and things like that in the past. What's the follow-up is the next question. You know, what's the follow-up to that? I think that's important. And Kimberly, Redwood Empire, right?
Yes.
Did I get that correct?
Correct. So we are a church in a box. We use a public space for our church every week. Okay. And we have the same sign, the same banner for many years. And, you know, for a little church like us, we're little at the moment, by the way. For now. I would like to see maybe some creative marketing ideas that we could use at our church level to get our name out there, to maybe change our image, our printed image. Right now, we don't really have a lot of art or you know, I just feel like we're kind of recreating a wheel if we decide to put something in print or change our logo. We recently sort of changed our logo, but we haven't really gotten it out there. So maybe just something helpful from the denomination level to inspire us to, and maybe some tools that aren't too complicated to just inspire us to be able to get our name out there. We're just a hop, skip, and a jump from the town plaza, yet and 2 doors down from the Chamber of Commerce in this little town. However, there's so many people that have no idea that we're there.
Right.
So some help with that.
Some help with that.
Really
Okay.
inspiring for us.
Thank you. Anyone else? In the spirit of time, I want to flip back and those that delay, only because I know it's about 1:15, and I want to honor that there's a limited amount of time, and I want them to get their chance.
Thank you, Rochelle. Do you have that question you can put up there just one more time, just to make sure? What would you need from MCC in the next 3 years to follow God's call to be and do ministry? Mr. Clinton, I just turned it on. I turned it on.
It's on, right? Yes. So, from a stewardship point of view, I have a suggestion to consider. I run a nonprofit. My 990s are printed on published. They know how much I make. They know what we do with our money. I think we have too many secrets in the area of stewardship and accountability in our churches. And I'd like to see us consider moving beyond that into more of an open, nonprofit, transparent way of accounting for our money.
Okay. Thank you, Jude.
One thing that is helpful for me as a pastor to have from the denomination, which I understand it's sometimes difficult to fully disseminate because you're in the middle of doing it, as opposed to just talking about it, is the international work of the denomination and the church planting work in the US. I know, Rochelle, that's one of your special areas, but I've found that every time I'm able to give concrete examples and insights into what we're doing around the world, the congregation responded enthusiastically. The congregation just raised $5,500 for the Rio National Conference, and they were enthused by that. And I'll be playing them the Rio Church's response on YouTube on the way at the beginning of service on Sunday. Got more information about what's going on and insights into other communities and completely different ways of being MCC, which I can then use to re-energize our own view of ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Clint.
design is serene. And the words I've been writing down from the Northern Church are like image, marketing, diversify, and to follow what God wants us to do. And it seems to me that as we're defining what God wants us to do, the money has to follow. And like in Los Angeles, the transgender community has no money, basically. They may already be homeless, a lot of us. But there's millions and millions of dollars flow through LA for all kinds of social services. So I think when you're following God, we have to be writing grants. We have to diversify our income, especially when the churches are in sort of a limbo situation right now. Where is our grant writing capability going to come from? And we know that as we define the mission, the money will follow. That's God's will.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Michael?
For a church like Resurrection Beach that doesn't have a pastor and is not necessarily in a financial place to have a pastor at this point, what we may need is support in finding creative ways to bring clerical support to our church in order to bolster the fantastic ministries that we're doing. Because, I worry about the congregation, getting burnt out and not having that spiritual renewal that clergy can bring to us.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Yes, sir. Roger.
I believe from the denomination, if there was a clearinghouse on how to do things, a small church who doesn't know how to advertise, a small church who doesn't know how to do finances, a big church that doesn't know how to do finances and advertise. If there was some resource place, some center where a church who has been successful in doing something can post that, then I can look it up and I would have to adapt it, but at least I have some reference point.
Okay, great. Thank you, Roger. Sure. Marie.
I think for MCCs all throughout, I think what we need to do is to combine our resources for, number one, our pastors to have health insurance. So there's got to be something to say with our numbers, that somehow we can have commingle some of that. And I may not be explaining it right, but like a big corporation, uses that big corporation mentality, so everybody has the payment or the drawdown is much less for the local church or the local chapter. Same as going to Staples and get office supplies or other things like that. We should be able to take our size and find ways to bring it down to the lowest level so that everyone can benefit from it.
Okay. Thank you, Marie. Thank you.
I would wish for some networking or development of resources around new theology, around getting into a 21st century way of speaking. What is the Christ myth now? What are we talking about in 140 characters or more or less? But what are we thinking? We keep saying we've got to get the message out, but what is it that we're thinking? And I'm sure there's a lot of thinking going on in different places, but we haven't all connected up yet.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Corey Montoya again, lay delegate. For me, three things actually. I'm part of the MCC's LEAD program, and so I get to read the bylaws for our church and the bylaws for the denomination. And just from my personal perspective, our bylaws are a little bit vague, and I don't think they cover any and all situations. So I think they should be made more specific in how we can relate to the situations that each church is facing in today's times. As I said earlier, number two, I think we need to network more, not only at the denomination level, but also at the network level as well, do more networking. and also utilize the resources that we have. A lot of our resources that are internal, not only within our denomination, but also in our local churches, are far underutilized. We utilize the resources we have at the local level and at the denomination level.
Great, great. Okay, thank you. And I realize that this is primary listening, but I will offer that I think that bylaws are not the end all, and that local churches need to have their own policies and procedures and standard operating procedures to augment the bylaws. So I think that that's fairly intentional so that there can be some contextual localization for those policies and procedures. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Dan, come on down before I turn it back over.
It seems like we're all fighting for the same dollar. And, you know, the denomination, along with our churches and even ministries within the churches, are fighting for the same dollar. So how can we diversify that? How can we spread that out further? And you, Clinton, talked about how all of us are having aging congregations. And what a wonderful way to be able to give an opportunity for someone to give to the church through legacy giving. And I would love the denomination to resource us in how we can say something that is just palpable or something good in helping in legacy giving and legally in the United States. And I'll just stop there.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. It's great. All right, I'll turn it back to Rochelle. You have any closing remarks?
The first one is okay. Yes, I do. I do have closing remarks. The first one is thank you. Thank you for speaking what's on your heart. Thank you for saying what. But I also know that in this moment, there are many of us that need more time. I think things are going to come to you and say, "Oh, I thought of that later, and I really want to communicate this." So we've been going around that there's one more network gathering before what I'm calling the Pause for Pride that will happen, that will go while everyone's out celebrating and marching and having festivals and doing their thing in their communities. And then there'll be more network gatherings later. But we need to communicate things we've already been hearing. And something that I have heard is some folks would like to have like a Survey Monkey survey of the 4 questions that they can sit down and write something. I encourage that. These 4 questions are not secret. Share them with the churches. Keep thinking about them. Keep sharing them. This is not an end-all one thing. Now, we can't listen until 2019, but we need to get more input. And so I think the Survey Monkey will do that. I'm also going to be, I'm setting up some, during this Pride, this Pause for Pride, I'm setting up some online versions where people can participate. We can do this through webinars. We'll also have some translation opportunities for that with German, Spanish, and Portuguese. No, I will not be doing that, but we'll have different elders listening. And I can read most of those languages, but I will not attempt to articulate question answering that. So I think it's important for us to realize that there's folks that aren't here, and their voices are really important. And they're not here because they might be working or just schedules don't work right. I know there's a big wine and cheese fundraiser that I'm not at, and attorneys, and I don't understand why I'm not there. But in all reality, not everyone can be here. We want to keep the space open. We want to keep the conversation going. These are not secrets, and so be looking for that Survey Monkey coming. We'll be communicating that widely. This is a space for faithful moving forward. And I really do want to listen. I am writing all these things down, and we're paying attention. And Some of this was new, some of this was not, but that's the good part. When I hear the commonality, and I think Tony will say this, Reverend Elder Nancy Maxwell, Reverend Elder Darlene Garner, there have been others who have been part of this listening, and there will be different ones when we're online. Those that maybe can't, like Reverend Elder Margarita Sanchez or Hector Gutierrez or Ines Paul Bowman in Germany. Um, Getting their voices and their ears and their experiences into this is really important. I also am very aware that we do have other limitations around people who sign or may not be able to communicate in some ways like this. So I also want to open that up. If there are communities in which we need to reach out more intentionally during this process, let us know. Okay, really important. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you, Tony, for facilitating over there. It's so good to hear all of your voices, those who I've met. I do hope to meet you all soon. And I'm grateful, very grateful for who you are. You need to know, I love MCC with all of my heart, with all of my soul, all of my being. I'm committed to serve you all. And that's what I'm here to do as an interim, is to serve you and to not leave a rock unturned. We're doing this thoroughly. We're doing this intentionally, inside, out, and everywhere. So walk with us. We can do this together because it's much bigger than any of us here. So bless you all and thank you.
Dave, would you come down here, please? Dave, are you still here? He's left. He left. Darn it. I asked him to come down so we could thank him. Dave's been doing this for 3 network gatherings right now. He's awesome at setting us up and solving all the problems with us non-techies. So even though, Dave, you can only hear this on remote or on video, we're giving you a big thanks now. Thank you.
A minute? 5-minute break? together. Hello. Woo. All right. We're in the home stretch, folks. Come on down. Find your seat. We're 5 minutes late. All right, we ready? Are we ready? We ready up north? Can I get my PowerPoint back in a little box? There we go. There you go. Big box. That's great. Okay. We're going to bring the people from the very back into their seats, please. And we'll get started because we have a little group exercise to do. Yay. 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 Can I hear some enthusiasm? Thank you, Roger. And this one is called Where Are We Now as a Church? And part of the purpose of this exercise is by locating in these different areas that we're going to go through, reactive, developmental, transitional, transformational, it should help you to be able to talk about the implications of which each of these are, help you to identify where you are, and also to begin to be able to ask new questions about what the Spirit is saying. So if you find yourself in one of these quadrants and you really think that, boy, I would really love our church to be in the other one, that brings new questions, right? And so one of the things that is really interesting is to do this with just a congregation, with one congregation. And I guarantee you not everyone will end up in the same quadrant. But then you get the people from the different quadrants to go talk to each other why they chose that particular quadrant. And so you have some really interesting conversations going on about that. So let's give it a try. And what we'll do is we'll read through each of these first. And so as we're reading through them, I want you to be thinking about your church. Is this describing your church? And we, again, realizing probably no church is singly in one. So think about the one that you most identify with your church. Okay? So the first one is reactive. There you go. Too fast. Reactive. Would somebody please read this for me? Can you? I have it up here on a piece of paper if somebody will read it. All right, I'll do it. Churches usually begin with great energy and expectation. A number of people with big vision work their hearts and souls out seeding and cultivating a new church. They often live close to each other in the community. But over time, this dynamic change, the church tends to get more focused on its internal life, and the surrounding neighborhood goes through demographic changes. Okay, reactive. Developmental. A developmental church believes it can grow and reach new people in the new space by improving what they are already doing. This attractional perspective focuses on producing programs and content that attract people to the church. The social system inside the church is one that assumes most of what they're doing is right, but is not just being marketed well. In other words, this is a social system that doesn't see the need to question its assumptions and ways of functioning. Developmental. Interesting, huh? Transitional. Thank you, whoever's moving those slides for me. I do appreciate that. A church in a transitional phase recognizes that no matter how much it improves what it's doing, no matter how attractional it becomes, the context has changed so much that people won't come anymore. Transitional implies being in between. It describes a church discovering that it has to get out beyond its own walls. It involves learning to ask different questions. Rather than asking, how do we attract people to what we are doing, we need to ask, what is God up to in this neighborhood? And how do we need to change in order to engage the people who no longer consider this church a part of their lives? Transition. Transformational. After a period of experimenting, failing, learning, and experimenting again, a transitional church discovers that, like missionaries in another culture, if they are to be a witness to what God is doing in the world, they need to focus continually on engaging their changing context and the people of their communities. They know they will be continually adapting to the communities and people where they live. Excuse me. It is not about being trendy or catering to the culture, but about being missionaries in their neighborhoods, shaping the gospel in the forms and language of the local people, and remaking church structures and social systems around the context rather than abstract notions of church drawn from a previous point in history. 4 very, very different places, huh? Okay. And I sent you all a copy of this too. You should have gotten a copy. Did you? Okay. Okay. So what we're going to do is everyone who thinks that their church fits the reactive model, come on down and stand in this corner. For those that feel their church is at the developmental place, up in this corner. I'm transitioning. And the transitional ones up here in this corner by the refreshments. So you don't go up there just because for the refreshments. You got to be in a transitional. And then over in this corner, transformational. And can you do the same thing up north? Can somebody facilitate that? They're doing it? Okay. Transformational. All right. You've got to say the one that best describes you right now. Right now. Best describes your church right now. Knowing that none of us is a perfect fit, but which one would you say? Y'all can't. You can't consult with each other. Now you need to make your own minds up. That's part of the fun of it. All right, remember where we are? Reactive is down here. Reactive. Reactive down here. Developmental over there. Transitional over here. Transformational down here. Reactive, developmental, transitional, transformational. Okay. Now, really interesting when, particularly when we have people from the same church in different quadrants, which is normal, which is interesting. Um, one thing somebody told me once that I thought was really interesting and valuable is if you ask, you want to know what really how people see your church, don't ask somebody who's been there 10 years. Ask the person that's been there 6 months, and you'll get a more accurate description of how your church is and where you are. Interesting. Okay, so, yes, sir. Oh, you're waving because they're in the same corner? How about that? We have kindred souls everywhere. All right. So we have the largest group over here is in the transitional. Okay. And we have reactive. That's all right. This is a no judgment zone. This is just about you got to start with your current reality, right? Absolutely. And you feel like you're really over in that transformational place. That is so good. Okay. Now, what I'd like you to do is just talk to someone from a different quadrant and tell them why you went to that particular one. Yeah, it means you got to move around. You got to meet somebody new and talk to them. Yeah, which is good. All right, Lynn. I'm in dire need of some aspirin. A couple more minutes, couple more minutes. Okay, if I can get us to start moving back to our spaces. Can we gather together? Painkiller. Okay. Okay. Let's take one of each. Thank you, Dr. Clinton. Thank you, dear. Yes, please. If you could take your seats, that would be wonderful. All right. Seemed like a lot of good energy, a lot of exchange of ideas. How'd it go up there north? They're still in groups. Okay. Well, they had a lot to discuss, obviously. While they're making their way back out of their groups, any observations from that exercise? Anything? Any from your discussions? Yes. Uh-huh. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Amy. So, basically, were you all able to hear her? I mean, she talks a lot about, how you can certainly make the circuit in terms of being in the different ones and the importance of what you learn in each one and how that informs where you go next. Is that a good sum? Okay. Okay. Great. What something else came out in your conversations?
Thing called the change cycle that I studied in Austin, Texas as part of the LEAD program, and how people, organizations go through change. And how I perceive it is that I can only talk about my church, is in between the developmental transitional stage. Because we are kind of in a transition, but kind of not. You know, we're still developing what we should do, how to do it, and why we should do it. And sometimes we spend too much time in that developmental stage, and it keeps us from transitioning into a new area, which I think we should already be in. But c'est la vie, you know, that's where we're at, is where we're at, you know. And so I think we need to keep moving through the process and not be stagnant in one part of the process.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have a, yes, Ken? Beth is on her way. Oh, and it's wonderful you meet people halfway.
I think this four quadrant thing suffers a little bit from what you were talking about earlier about church growth thing that said it was a path that was desired to go on. And
Right.
I just want to push back a little bit on that. For example, was it that corner that was developmental? And the thing says, you know, that church thinks what they're doing is good and they just need to do a better job of drawing people in to see that. Well, maybe what they're doing is good, you know, and having more people experience that would be just fine without having to do other things. But maybe what they're doing is not good. I don't want there to be an assumption that what you're doing is bad until you can get over to there, and what you're doing is bad until you can get from there to there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. Yes. Jenny.
Jenny Nichols from here at Founders. What I've sensed in my own congregation here is that different parts of this congregation are in different places of that quadrant. I mean, there are some ministries that are transitional, there are some ministries that are way still reactive, there are some ministries that are just in every single section. And if I'm in multiple ministries, I can be transitional in one of my ministries, I can be reactive in another ministry, so it's fluid. I mean, I wanted to stand in the middle of the room and just hold my arms out in a big circle because that's where I feel I am in this congregation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you. Toby.
Taking Jenny's metaphor, and I'm from Founders too, I feel that we're like a family that has just arrived at the seaside on a glorious English southern beach, which is all stones, not lovely sand. And the parents look at the water and say, "Isn't the water lovely?" Maybe one of them rolls up their trousers and takes off their shoes and socks and dips their toe in and sort of paddles a little bit and enjoys it. And where are the kids? They dove in. They dove in while many of us stand on the shore conceptually admiring the beauty of the water, but not wanting to get our hair wet, or not being willing to be seen because of our body image or whatever it is. And I think that's a metaphor for where we stand. We have different generations, different age groups. Some of us are more comfortable where we are, less willing to take risks, and basically fear is freezing us from diving in. And somehow we need to be refreshed by the Spirit to embrace not only conceptually the idea of diving in, but to do in our ministry what we've heard of in feeding 2,000 of the homeless, and actually dive into ministry.
Great. Thank you, Toby. Do we have anybody from up north that wants to share? Yay? Nay?
They're delaying right now, so
They're delaying?
they think it takes them about 30 seconds to hear what you just asked.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm just asking if anyone would like to comment from up north on your experience of that exercise. And while we're waiting for them to do that, I just say is that this is, again, you know, we're not about judging. We're helping to understand where we are, who we are, and to give us a common language to be able to talk about those things and to be able to ask new questions together.
They have no comment.
Okay. Well, how come they stayed in their group so long and then they have no comments? I'm a little concerned about that. But we'll move on. Yes. Sure. Thank you, Marie. Thank you. Okay, so I am going to move to the next one, and what well, I was going to move to the next slide. Oops, there we go. Here we go. Wait a minute. Okay. So a lot of questions have been asked. Well, you know, we understand a lot of what's not working, and so what? Okay, sure. Please.
I don't know. Well, I don't know. I guess we tried. We tried.
False alarm? Where are we, Jude?
This is Liz from Many Journeys in San Mateo. When we went through the exercise here, we pretty much, all of the churches kind of found themselves not identifying with one area, but at least two, if not all of the areas, be it different ministries, be it the history of the city/neighborhoods that we were in. So we definitely saw ourselves in multiple areas within our own congregations.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. That, and we had a lot of that similar here in the South. We are in the South, in California. Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Thank you for those comments. And this is, we've talked about, you know, some of the challenges, about some of the challenges with the attractional model and not seeing the same results that we used to get from that. And so what are some of the shifts that we're seeing, and what is working? And so you can see from this that the attractional model is, of course, what we've all been probably raised in. And that is, you know, and this is what I was raised in, this is what I've been taught, this is what I've known, is that, you know, we have the church, you just need to come be a part of it, and we have everything you need here, right? The missional model is very different. The church, the sanctuary, is still a place for fellowship and a place for worship, but it's just as much a mission post as it is sanctuary. So it's a place where we come in, we get fed, but we go out from to follow Jesus in the world, to be part of changing the world, to be part of feeding the homeless, as you did at Resurrection Beach. So you can see it's very, very different model, right? Now, in the missional model, and it's a culture shift too, right? I mean, would you really have membership class if you were doing the missional model? Or what would membership class look like? Probably be very, very different. There are several MCCs, a couple MCCs, well, three I would say, that are really working on becoming the missional model. And MCC Omaha is very, very much committed to moving from this attractional to missional. I would say our church MCC in the Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania is well on their way towards living into this new model. And just to give you some idea is that this is not just, almost any size church can make this shift. There's a 16,000 member church in Phoenix that is intentionally working on making this shift. So it can be done, and I think that when I look at this and I think about the attractional model versus the missional model, which feels more right to you? I mean, is it, Does it seem as though our faith really calls us to be a little bit more in that missional model? Just think. And it's interesting because in the one of the first post-resurrection appearances of Jesus, one where he just showed up in the upper room, and then there's the one, and then he shows his side to the disciples, and then it goes on, and you have doubting Thomas in there. And most of the time people spend on that scripture is around Thomas and faith and things like that. But what Jesus said after the disciples recognized him is this: just as God has sent me, I am sending you. So the church is not the destination. The upper room was not the destination. And he wanted to make sure they understood that. Yes, it was a good place to be, safe place to come worship and fellowship together, but this is not our final destination. We go out from here, right? And so often, that's the part of that particular scripture I think we skip right by. Sound familiar? So, if we were to begin, and I want to say is that around millennials, one of the things that I've been learning is if I read enough about millennials, I realize that there is no one box that you can put millennials in. It just doesn't work. And so, right, and to say that a millennials only like archaic traditional worship or don't want anything to do with archaic traditional worship is not fair, because it's not true across the board. And so what I say is that you have to be really true to your purpose and who you are and be unapologetic about it. And if you are part of going out and making a difference and doing something in the world, then people will want to join you on that journey. Millennials are not so inclined to want to come support the institution. But I will follow you if we're going to go out and be Jesus making a difference in the world. Make sense? And so that's about the only generality around millennials that I've found that carries over, that seems to have any real weight. Because the idea that you do a certain kind of music or a certain style of worship or something like that, I don't think that's a fair statement. It's just a generality. Thank you for nodding. So part of what we do in this is that how do we help ourselves make this shift, since this is really big for us to be able to do this. And I'm not saying that the attractional model is completely dead. I'm not saying that. And there are places where the attractional model is still really working well. So you have to context is so incredible, is so important. Our churches in Sarasota, Florida, where every day when a whole generation turns 65, they get another influx of people. That's very different than our church in Grand Rapids in Michigan, where a lot of those people are leaving to move south. So, but yet more young people are being attracted to Grand Rapids. So you have a very, very different context. And just be thinking, in thinking about those things, I think what the big takeaway with this is that of all the research that's been done on churches, of all of it, says that the one indicator of decline is an inward focus for the church. That's the factor that's universal. If you become inward focus, it relates to decline. That inward focus. So it's vital congregations are outward focused. You may not be entirely missional, but you are outward focused. So what happens when you focus inward? It becomes all about your needs, your wants, and your comfort, rather than about what is God calling us to do in the world and how are we going to accomplish that together. Okay? And if God is at work in the world, it would only seem to make sense that we would want to go be a part of it. Yes, sir.
That's not a definite split. I mean, for me or the deacons or even some of our members, every time you go into the supermarket, I'm wearing a collar. People know what I am, and I have conversations.
Right.
And form relationships. And whether or not they ever come to church, there's still a pastoral relationship. And people contact me because somebody's died or their partner's left them or something like that, and I'll never see them in church. And that's definitely missionary activity. But again, it's this ladder thing. I have the feeling that there's a definite direction which people are being goaded in, just like they were with the previous branch of ideas when it came down to church growth. And when that doesn't work, and all the energy is being put in by the churches, what do we then say to them?
Yeah. Well, I can appreciate that, and I'm just offering you another option of what I've been learning and what I've been seeing, and saying, that this is what we're seeing some success in.
And in pastoral care as well. I mean, I hope that there's a regular pastoral care ministry in places where there's tens or dozens of people who there are regular check-ins being done. That is missionary activity, and it just seems faddish to me, and detrimental. And everyone ends up feeling like, from looking at the 4 sheets of paper, 3/4 of the people or more will say, well, I'm failing because I'm not on the 4th piece of paper. And you can say that the intent isn't that you have to be there, but all the language is saying you have to be there, every last bit of it. It's quite self-consciously, everything is a little sneery in places, but everything is inadequate apart from this last one, despite the fact that everyone recognizes that they exist in most of them, therefore 3/4 of them are going to feel inadequate. Rather like the old church size, whereby middle-sized churches that were thriving, whether in Louisiana or elsewhere, ended up feeling like they were failing corporate-sized churches rather than thriving pastor-sized churches, from which I might add the denomination draws 80% of its income.
Right. Okay, thank you, and that's fair, and I appreciate that. I think what I've been trying to do in the bigger picture is say, here's how the world's changing, and the reality is most of our churches are staying the same, and the world is changing. So how do we continue to be relevant in today's world with the changes? What adaptations do we need to make? How do we need to do things maybe a little bit differently? How are we aware of that? Then through looking at the life cycle, which is normal, that's part of everyday thing, is life cycle. We all live through that. And so where are we in the life cycle? Just to help us to understand where we are, so to maybe be where we can continue to be a vital congregation, what would be our next steps? And then so through these other pieces, to give you people some tools and some vocabulary to begin to talk about these different places. Now, I again say context is one size fits all. And if what you're doing is working really well, then there's no need to, I'm not saying change, I'm saying that you probably are in that red part where you just need to continue to refresh. But in the other side of things, you got 4,000 churches in the U.S. going out of business every year. You've got a significant decline in people regularly attending worship. And so, at some point, you also have the article in the Washington Post, 23 Easters left if mainline Protestant denominations stay on the same trajectory, which is this. So somewhere along the way, we've got to just say, okay, is this working? If it is, okay, what's working? Let's stay with it. There are also places where we obviously need to think about doing some things differently. And so I just offer those out. Like I said, I don't believe that there are any experts anymore. I believe that they're all practitioners in this together. And so here's some information. How might this be applicable for you? How might you be able to use this in continuing to be a vital congregation in the world? That's my hope. I don't know if that was helpful or not, Clinton. Yes, no, maybe. Okay. Well, and the reality too is that, we have vital congregations and we have a more than significant number that are in serious decline. And so, how can we pay attention to where we are, deal with our current reality, name it, and give ourselves and offer some options for some ways forward. And again, with the revitalization program, it's context, context, context. We meet you where you are in your cultural context, and then we help you to move from there. But we don't tell you what that destination is. Okay. So, yes.
Are we calling successful churches, do they have something in common like being authentic?
Yeah, I would say, vibrant churches are generally ones that are more clear about their purpose. And as I said earlier, I think that the commonality is that people's lives are being changed there, and they're helping change their community for the better and helping to change the world then in turn. So it's more about outcomes, I would say.
And it's also based on purpose and sticking to that purpose.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Roger. All right, so in the churches that we're seeing this happen, what are some of the shifts that are taking place? Well, again, I talked earlier about decision making to discernment and really spending much more time in that spiritual discernment place rather than making those quick snap decisions about things. That we're a spiritual community, we're engaged in spiritual practices, and we're learning to discern together what God is up to in the world and how we can be a part of it. From seeding to sending, again, that passive model of church where people come, plop, pray, and pay, versus that's what I'm just using a phrase that is familiar. And, pardon me? Well, it could be seen as mocking or it could be seen as true. Yeah. So plop, pray, pay is one model, and it's so people that, what we're finding, again, this is the millennials are looking more towards the model of being part of doing something that's not so passive. But for there, I would just say that oftentimes we feel that our building is our destination. And we get all wrapped up in our building, and the reality is our building becomes our mission. And by that, I mean then the building has become a monument rather than a tool for ministry. And so, oftentimes you end up and you look at the budget and all of the money is going to the building. And everything that, is talked about on the board agenda and things is about the building. And yet they have a stated mission over here. And they may not be the same. So just, and I think, how do we become good stewards of the buildings that we have? Maybe even better stewards is the word I was looking for. Because, in some places they're only using it one day a week. Just only on Sundays. And so, is that really the best steward of that building if it's only being used one day a week? Or is there ways for it to become more of a community center? Particularly as we're looking at ways around, when there's more financial challenges, and looking at different economic models, maybe there's the way for our churches to be more of community centers. I don't know. I've seen that in a couple places. I think Baton Rouge is an example where they really use the building 7 days a week. with a lot of different community buildings. So, and then from services to services, you still have services, but everyone actually, the important part is that those services are that we're going to go out and we're serving our world. Okay. So back to the revitalization process. Now I finally get to this. So again, it's not a quick fix. It's not just a how-to. It's just not a series of steps. It's a process that does not and cannot happen quickly. It takes time. Again, microwave versus crock pot. And you'll see all of these things, on the internet where they'll say 5 things you need to do as a leader to change your church. And there's probably some value in those things, but oftentimes I think that those are often put in there as if you do these things, you're going to have an instant results, and that they're applicable to every context, and I just don't believe that's true. Highly contextualize. It's a process that does require, to listen, to really a dedication to listening and following God. I believe that it's a process that requires humility to learn together and deepen your faith. And you have to be willing to take risk and dare greatly. And we talked about earlier about the importance of, being able to take risk and experiments and doing things new, and often sometimes what a real challenge that can be in congregations. And it is a process that, is the work of the congregation. It really is the work of the congregation with the Spirit, and we're facilitated by the Office of Church Life, and we provide resources, guidance, and support for congregations through the process. And any congregation can join the program at any time. And you're welcome to do just an exploratory call with Reverend Lisa Heilig or myself. And what we do is we'll talk you through what questions you might have, or what maybe your board of directors or your leadership might have. We could do a Skype call and talk about it. And then we would help you to begin with that assessment process. But we are available. We would love to have you join us in this program. And at any time you feel the call, we're more than willing to help. So just a quick overview of what the process looks like is that, I want to just compliment Lisa Heilig again, who's the resource development specialist. She spent almost a year working on this program and developing these resources together, and developing these resources. And so again, when you go back to the life cycle, there were the 3 different tracks, and so we have different processes around each of those different, depending where you are in the life cycle, right? So opening, that awareness of the need for change, holding, creating that holding space where it'll be safe for everybody to listen and share, and listening, that important part of listening to one another, listening to what the Spirit is saying, unearthing your congregation's story and values to name, claim, and reframe as needed, being present to God and one another, and then, of course, moving into that discerning, engaging in those spiritual practices together is an important part of the process, and then experimenting, that willingness to go out and try new ideas and innovations, and then learning, determining, what can be learned and what did we learn from each step in this process together. The learning, I think, is ongoing, because I think that, you'll be back into that loop again of learning and learning again and learning new things. So that's just a little overview of how the program works. Let's see. Oh, just kind of a last reminder that God is always one step ahead of us. God is always doing a new thing. And see, the former things have taken place, and new things I declare. Before they spring into being, I announce them to you. Sing unto God a new song. And I believe that, as we're called to learn those new songs, that we will. At the right time and the right place. And that, with God as our conductor, together we can really make some beautiful music together as MCC. So how do you find out more? And again, I said I would send these slides out to everyone. There is a lot more information about the revitalization program on our website. There's some on-demand webinars that you can watch. But again, I said Lisa Heilig or myself are very willing to Skype in, or if we're in a geographical area, we're happy to come in person to help you to get the process started. And then again, there are our email addresses up there. So we would love to have you participate, and we just continue to pray God's blessings upon each of you and your ministry. So thank you for all you do and all of the many ways that you are MCC. So Jude, that concludes my presentation, but I'll take any questions you have. Questions? Yay?
And last time we did like a certificate, and I know that you have so many certificates, so we're giving you chocolate.
Oh, chocolate! Yay! Chocolate. Wow, thank you. 2 boxes. Is it getting? Oh, love the way you're thinking, Jude. Yeah. All right.
Just want to say thank you very much for coming out. As I watch your progression through the networks, I'm hearing from networks that they're really taking these things on board, and maybe not everybody's buying it as a sales job, and I don't think that's the intention, but some people are at least taking a look at what's happening in their church. Have you done that today? Just take a look. That's the whole point of networks, is kind of like present ideas, see what happens, see what you want to do with it. Obviously, God is speaking to you in different ways than God may be speaking to me. So thank you very much for coming. At the end of every network gathering, we have a time where the network team will come up and you all can give us some feedback. We have some questions for you today, so I hope you'll stick around for that. Then we'll have a little networking, and we're actually going to finish early. So really appreciate it. I want to thank Tony. I want to really thank the host church. They've gone above and beyond today. The booth folks, Don Mueller, who is new on our network team, come on down here. Don and I are the southern end of the network team today. Dan had to get back, busy pastors and so on like this. So we just want to ask you a couple of things, like we've had 3...
Today, so I hope you'll stick around for that. And we'll have a little networking, and we're actually going to finish early. So really appreciate it.
Sharon, please mute.
I want to really thank the host church. They've gone above and beyond today.
Half of my texts today have been mute, unmute. So, appreciate it. Anyway, Don, come up. So this is our 3rd time that we've done this broadcast thing, and some of you have been here, some of you have been other places, and some of you haven't come at all. We're happy to see you here today. Is it working? This remote back and forth thing, does it work for you? And I have to admit that our 2 key players are gone today, but I think we'll get to better. Oh, last time it was. Okay. Okay, thank you. We'll fix that. We're still work in progress, obviously. Thanks. Technology is getting better too, I think, so that may help us. What do the rest of you think? Is it working? Is it, anybody talk to people that aren't here? What's that about? They can watch the video later on, or what? Because part of the network is gathering the neighborhood together. That face-to-face communication that you've had today, that opportunity to put a face to a name or a true face to a Facebook page, those kind of things. So what do you think? Is this helpful? Is face-to-face stuff useful to you? Okay. So would you like to see more of that in kind of a smaller group opportunities in future networks? Okay, thank you. Okay. 3 years we've done this. Anybody else have any comments about the use of technology? Yes, Toby.
Maybe it would be possible for the network to try and do some of the things that were expressed as aspirations for the denomination as a whole to do, to support local churches from a purely selfish perspective. For example, a webinar for local church treasurers. Similarly, you could take almost every other role or function and have a webinar just for them. Relatively small number of people, but very focused and able to connect people together in a network so they can help each other after the webinar, but also to share knowledge on current issues and concerns and possible solutions.
So if we were doing one just for church treasurer, I'm going to pick your brain, Toby, because I know how much talent you have in this. So what would you include as some things in that particular one?
Really hard to put me on the spot right now.
Sorry.
But things like accounting for restricted gifts and how to do that well and perhaps to avoid communication techniques for treasurers that can help to build trust among the congregation and foster generosity versus traps that you can easily fall into that can never abuse it. And tax issues, property taxes, sales taxes, unrelated business income taxes, where some people know those topics really well and others really don't know anything and need.
Mm-hmm. So how many of you think in your own church that your treasurer would attend a webinar or would participate in a webinar? Okay. Well, we're always looking for topics for webinars, so I promise you I will follow that one up. Yes, sir.
I am a great fan of this magnificent website that MCC has. And I will say one of the finest things that it has is the treasurer's procedures and what have you. Early on, I don't know the mistake, actually it was good that it happened. I pressed print, and 200 or some odd pages later, but I would say this, that some of the things that were brought up, as you go through there are links that will give you directly the quotes from the tax service and what have you, and for your state. And so, I'm very impressed with that. And I assure you, I'm a novice. I was not a CPA or a treasurer before or what have you. But I've certainly learned. I certainly believe in baptism under fire. But anyway, that's a great, great website. If you've not checked it out, go into the treasurer's portion. MCC.
I'll do a feature and put that link in our next newsletter for everybody so that you can look at that. But I also am going to follow up in the webinar. Yes, sorry, Kevin.
I think webinars are great. I also think that there would be a huge benefit if the treasurers were at least connected by email and or encouraged to Skype together if the clerks
idea. That's a great idea. Noah? Yeah. How many others have deacons in here? Phoenix? Webinar, or you could do it on cell phone? Yes, go ahead.
I'd like to see one for lay delegates.
Oh, for lay delegates. Okay. Tom? So online webinars you all think are a good idea? All right, should we do them in the daytime, at night, on weekends? What? So let's do a quick show of hands. How many of you in the morning? How many of you at night? Saturday morning? Am I getting more up? There's not a consensus here. But record it is what you're saying. Okay? So in order to have a webinar, you want to have representatives there to ask questions so that everybody sort of gets their questions answered. So if we did that and we said we're going to have a webinar, would you be willing to send in your questions that you might have so we could like have the topics that you'd like to hear? Okay, we can do that. We'll look at that. Yes, ma'am. Fundraising? Mm-hmm. Okay. Good topics.
I don't remember. No, go ahead.
Okay. All right. Roger.